Solitaire Rose Radio, Episode 19, Kassie Brown. Now, I know that many of you who are listening to this are scrambling to run to Wikipedia or Comicspedia or the Grand Comic Book Database to see who is Kassie Brown. And no, I didn't mispronounce the name as Stephanie Brown, who was Spoiler and Robin. Kassie Brown is someone I met when I worked at a movie theater, and she's now working for Americorps. And she has a fascinating story. I've been reading her blogs through the years and watching her journey through Facebook and knowing friends of hers. And I thought it would be interesting to do an interview with her. Now, I apologize for the sound quality because she was on a cell phone in the backwoods of Oregon in a yurt. So the sound quality on her end is not the greatest in the world. Now, for those of you who are saying, wait, this doesn't have to do with comics. One of the things I said when I started Solitaire Rose Radio was that I am looking for stories. Everybody has a story. And in talking with Peter Rios in that very long interview I did, and if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's really good. Not because of me, but because of him. We talk a little about how podcasting really grew out of blogs. And I've blogged in the past from time to time. Never been someone who really is passionate about it, but I've become very passionate about podcasting. And one of the things I did in my blogs and in my Twitter and on my Facebook and in all the social media and everything, I have a very odd mix of things that I'm interested in. Comic books, of course. Politics, not as much as I used to. News events, people. And as I go into this, one of the things that I've listened to lately is a 500th episode of Mark Maron's WTF podcast, where he examines his life as it has changed doing the podcast. And one of the things he talked about in it was, over those 500 episodes, he has become less focused on himself and more interested in the people who come into his garage and sit down and tell their stories. And as I do Solitaire Rose Radio, I do stuff that I'm interested in. EC Comics, Jack Kirby, comic book creators, people who've worked in and around comics. I've got hopefully some interviews coming up with people who are comic fans who have very interesting jobs. But I also want to, every once in a while, just drop in a story that I find interesting. And I hope you find it interesting too. So I hope you enjoyed this interview with Kassie Brown. My first non-comics interview is with Kassie Brown, who I used to work with at a movie theater, and she has gone on to do some very interesting things. Kassie, where are you, and what in the world are you doing?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm currently in Sandy, Oregon, which is about 45 minutes outside of Portland, kind of away from the ocean. And I'm working with a program called the National Civilian Community Corps. So it's NCCC is how I'll talk about it. It's a lot easier to say. It's a program that's modeled after the Depression-era Civilian Conservation Corps. So we do a lot of similar work like trail building, environmental stewardship type things. And right now I'm working in a garden, so I'm kind of living my ideal life with a really cool organization here in Oregon.
Okay, so who is the garden for? Is it for the other people there, or are you doing it for the community, or?
It's a good mix. It's a kind of a new garden. So the organization that I'm working with through my program, NCCC, is a very unique organization. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically, like, we travel around and work with different nonprofits and different government organizations. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here. So the organization that we're currently having our project with is called Ant Farm, and it's this really kind of a magical organization. It's they do so much, like youth development, community outreach, and the garden is a newer implement in the organization, and it's kind of just supposed to be providing local fresh produce to people here in Sandy, and also getting youth outside and getting young adults to do something that is meaningful and to help them like just feel fulfilled a little bit and have kind of a routine in their day. So it's just a beautiful space, and we're trying to get a farmers market up and running on Friday nights. And it's kind of, slow start because the community is a little bit new to the whole market idea. But yeah, it's kind of just for everybody. We've been taking a lot of produce home with us because the market isn't really going so well yet. But yeah.
So I imagine if it's like any other garden I've ever dealt with, you have way too many zucchini and yellow squash.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I'm super shocked to realize that we have not planted squash yet. And it's like zucchini season, right? That's so weird. But we're actually planting some winter squash varieties tomorrow. But yeah, it's definitely a new thing, so we don't really have too much of anything at this point except kale.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, when I knew you,
Uh-huh.
we've known each other, but when we were hanging out together, we worked in a movie theater. It was a chain movie theater. We were both being paid horribly, horribly well.
Yeah.
You were a high school student.
Yeah.
And you always had this sort of left-leaning, idealistic way about you.
I love that.
And now you've gone through college, and you're in kind of a left-leaning, idealistic job.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get from making sure popcorn was swept up to where you are now? What's a kind of a condensed version of your journey?
Oh, gosh. Let's see here. So,
if you can condense it. If you can't, we got time to fill.
Okay, let me see how I can condense it. I guess, it is a pretty easy story, actually. The movie theater was definitely a huge part of high school for me. Like, the hours that we worked and just kind of that whole experience was so unique. But yeah, then I went to UW-Madison for college, and I studied community and environmental sociology, which is very left-leaning. It's kind of like I don't even know. It's a very weird major. It used to be called rural sociology, and it's all about kind of like integrating traditional like farmer values and kind of like the history of agriculture into modern civilization. And so I did a lot of like community development type things. I learned a lot about the history of agriculture in the United States and a lot about kind of the idea of democracy and how that's really rooted in civilian values and kind of just like, I don't know, my whole major was just kind of like reevaluating the society that we live in and looking at it from so many different perspectives. And I just, all through college, I couldn't imagine myself like going into the corporate world or going into like a normal job or, just I had too much like questioning of society and too much like just knowledge of things that aren't great that are going on in our country. And so, yeah, I graduated and Americorps stood out to me as just some way to kind of like meet people and travel the country for free, which is a huge bonus from this program, and just work with organizations that are really trying to make a difference. And so far that's happened. Like, I've worked with people that are like super passionate about working with autistic youth, and I've worked with people that are excited to like clear invasive species and try to like reestablish native habitats and increase like fish populations of like fish species that I've never even heard of before. So it's just been this like great trajectory of just kind of having, it's a real privilege actually, like being able to see society from a different angle and knowing that I don't want to be a part of like the mainstream world and then being able to find outlets for that. And I think that's kind of how I ended up here.
Well, that's really cool. One of the things that happened to me when I got out of college, I was planning, my final year of college, I was planning to go into the Peace Corps. Americorps didn't exist yet, but I had to pay rent. And I had responsibilities that came upon me that kind of prevented me from that. So I went into sort of working in group homes with the kids in juvenile justice. And the thing I remember was I got out of college and you had that feeling that I want to save the world.
Yeah.
And working in juvenile justice, that gets beaten out of you really fast.
I can imagine.
Because you become very cynical very, very quickly. And it sounds like you haven't had that cynicism. What has the transition been from being in college, which is kind of a very structured environment, to it sounds like now it's more you're creating the structure for other people. What has that transition been like?
Well, It's funny that you say that I haven't really had that cynicism because in a way I feel like Americorps has worked it out of me. And in college I kind of had that experience of like, it's kind of a weird story, but I had this experience in college where it's like a very structured environment, but I was also lucky enough to kind of create my own structure there too, where I had a job at the LGBT campus center, and I had a lot of freedom to kind of like create events and do what I wanted to do, and I had this experience midway through where things went really wrong, and it kind of ended in kind of a battle on campus between some big organizations and a lot of kind of identity politics involved. And for a couple of years, like I really felt the cynicism and just like crappy, like, oh, the world sucks, I can't change anything, like anything I do is going to fail, and like just that feeling of being like, wow, the real world is way hard. And
Yes.
no matter how idealistic you are, like it's always going to come back to reality, and reality always sucks. Like people are always going to be angry, and you're never going to break through that like hostility and distrust. And like I still have some feelings like that sometimes, but I don't know, I guess after I graduated and the real world hit and I was like, yeah, there's bills and there's rent, but I kind of just every day remind myself, like, you would get one life, like I know that's also super idealistic and very privileged of me to say, but I just kind of have to go with that, and I see people doing amazing things, and the people that I'm working with now here at Ant Farm, I'm currently sitting, by the way, just to describe this to you, I'm sitting in a traditional yurt that was constructed by about 100 different people with clay walls, like a stone archway, and big hay barrels covered in like traditionally made wool blankets from a native tribe around here. And like there's wood in little holes in the ceiling and a fireplace in the middle, and like it's all open to the world. So like the people that own this land are incredible like visionary souls, and they're starting this nonprofit, Ant Farm, that's not like super successful by any means. They're definitely struggling for money, and things don't always work. They like can't meet deadlines sometimes. But overall, like, the energy that they have, that they bring to the world is just so inspirational. Like, nothing really gets them down. They just see everything as, like, a new door opening and a new possibility. And so I guess, like, surrounding myself by people like that and kind of, like, putting myself in these situations, it definitely helps kind of keep that, like, bitterness or, like, cynicism at bay, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what you described, they don't have drum circles at night, do they?
Oh my gosh, actually, so Noompa is our sponsor for this project. He's kind of the founder of Ant Farm, and he's the person who like invited our team to come here through his application to NCCC, and he leads these like visionary quests, kind of, and in next weekend they're having a sweat lodge here. And a couple weeks ago, they had a big group of people that all descended on us on this camp. And all these people came from around the world. Like, there was somebody from Germany, people from different states that come, and they all, like, pack these trucks together. Like, they packed food and, like, propane, water barrels, everything. And they were about to leave to go on this, like, 4-day journey to the desert, like, somewhere south of Oregon, and have this, like, questing thing. And we woke up at, like, 4 o'clock in the morning to a huge drum circle and these, like, native voices just, like, singing these beautiful songs, like, calling. I can't even describe how incredible it was. It was like something out of a movie. So, actually, yes, there are drum circles.
So you basically become a hippie.
Yeah, basically. You're kind of getting the picture.
Now, this isn't the first assignment you've had.
It's not. It's actually
I remember there. Walk me through the process of joining Americorps. Is it like a job where you fill out your form and you give them your resume and they interview you, or is there something different to it? And what was the process of kind of moving out, casting your lines off, and sailing off into this, what sounds to me like almost uncharted territory?
Very uncharted, yes. Well, it's kind of like a job, but it's actually a lot easier. It's an online application, so I filled it out. I actually spent 2 years filling out the application because it's all stored online, and I did little bits at a time. I actually, in the middle of college, kind of during the whole experience that I was describing to you a minute ago, I really thought about dropping out, and I couldn't handle the college environment. People were so, like, uptight, and it was just so restraining in some ways. Like, the arguments that people would get into about, like, stupid little things and, like, I don't know, I got really disillusioned for a while, and I was like, I'm just going to leave this place, like, this university is not for me, and I'm going to join Americorps, like, travel around the country and, like, help people and build homes and do all this stuff. So I started the application my sophomore year of college, and I finished it, like, 2 days after I graduated college, so 2 years later, and yeah, it's just kind of it asks you, like, your skills. You have to have, like, a mission statement, and you have to create this little profile that kind of talks about, like, it's basically like an online resume with a little bit more information and, like, prompted questions that you answer. And then from there, it's just a waiting game. You just, like, wait for them to look at your application, and then they call you and they say, are you prepared to serve your country? Are you prepared to live with a group of 8 to 12 people and travel around for 10 months with no contact to the outside world? Like, it's this kind of crazy recruitment process.
And what was your first assignment? Well, first, how long did you have to wait for that assignment? And then what was the first assignment?
Well, so the way that my program works is that we all come to campus on the same day. So it's kind of a closed program. Like, the dates are October 9th through July 24th. Like, every year, that's how the program runs. So in the beginning of October, we actually were furloughed because of the government shutdown, if you remember way back then.
Oh, yes. My co-host on my other show, Joe, he was what they called a traveling TSA agent. That's kind of why we started the show.
Oh, yeah?
And he put in to be off the road. And because of the furlough, he had to stay on the road. He had to keep being sent to Alaska and New Orleans and Montana and Hawaii and all these other places to, dig through people's luggage.
Oh, my God.
So the government sequester and shutdown is familiar to our listeners.
Okay. Yeah, that was huge. Like, we thought that Americorps as a whole program was going to be shut down. That was kind of the rumors that we heard. So for me, it was kind of a guessing game. Like, the day that we were supposed to leave was like 2 days after the shutdown happened, and it was just kind of all of a sudden, like, the plans that I had made for my post-college graduation life were all of a sudden canceled. But yeah, so eventually, everything worked out. The shutdown ended, and I think we came to campus like 3 weeks late, but it all turned out fine. So that was kind of a long road of just waiting and questioning and not knowing if I even wanted to go anymore, like, after all of the debate and, like, not knowing how stable the program was going to be. But I ended up getting to campus a little bit before November, and then we all, like, convene for a couple weeks and have all these training sessions. We learn first aid and get, like, CPR certified and learn how to operate shelters if we had to respond to an emergency, which is also an element of the program. If there's any kind of natural disaster, we're, like, deployed to that. And then, so then our first assignment was a very short one. It was only, like, 4 weeks long right before we went home for Christmas. I think it was, like, the beginning of November to the beginning of December. And I was in Central California at Fort Tejon State Historic Park, basically just painting windows. It's not very glamorous work. It was fun, though.
It ain't all glory.
No, definitely not. It's been a long road from there, but yeah, that was an interesting project. It was fun. We met a lot of interesting people, but it was kind of a small town life and just a lot of scraping old wood and then repainting it.
That seems to be a job that a lot of people start at. When I interviewed Greg Theakston, who's an artist, his first job as an art assistant, he spent a summer stripping wallpaper, sanding window frames, stuff like that. It's almost like everybody needs to go through this Karate Kid experience where you wax on, wax off, and somehow that's supposed to teach you.
Yeah.
And did it teach you, or were you, I don't know why I'm doing this.
That's a good question. I think it did. I think those experiences do definitely teach you things. Maybe the lesson is different for everybody. I know that first round for me it was really hard just to do that and be like, am I really, we get paid, we have a stipend that's a very small amount, and there are benefits of the program, but in a way, like, I have student loans, there's, like, bills to pay, and I'm thinking, like, really, am I going to do this, like, for so little, in return? And then you start questioning kind of, like, your values in life and, like, why am I here? But I think I learned from it. I think I really kind of valued, like, that it seemed like meaningless labor, but it was so valuable to the people that wanted us to do it, you know. And in the end, that's what matters. Like, who are you to say what's meaningful? If somebody's telling you that they need it done, then that's what's meaningful.
Well, you've had a number of different tasks because I follow
Mm-hmm.
you on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and I have two questions related to that. What is the one thing, if someone were to ask you, what's the one thing that you are the most proud of that you've done? What would that be?
Wow, the most proud of, I think, oh geez, there's so much. I guess there's kind of two answers, like on a professional level, or just kind of like in terms of the work that we've done. I would say there's been kind of, probably, I was in San Luis Obispo, California, for my second round project, and I was working with a woman, Meredith Hardy, who's like one of 4 fish and wildlife habitat specialists in the state of California. Amazing woman, like so smart, just like super passionate about protecting fish habitats and like preserving wetlands and estuaries. And we did a lot of work with her. One of our projects was doing this massive planting campaign on a kind of a secondary tributary that leads to the Morro Bay estuary, which is like a federally protected estuary, and it's like a really unique place where the salt water meets the fresh water, and it's just like a magical element of the world. You know, it's super cool. But we did this planting campaign where we went out with the California Conservation Corps, and just for a couple days, probably actually a couple weeks, we just took native plants and planted this like huge area that was just acres wide, and trying to protect the stream, trying to create like shade cover and get some roots in the hillside so that there's less erosion. And they've done, like the California Conservation Corps does work like that all the time. That corps is incredible. The people that join, like they're so just like, I admire them so much for the hard work that they do each and every day. But we had the privilege to work with them for those weeks in the planting. And oh my gosh, I think it was like really hard work, you know, just like every day for 8 hours, like digging in the sun and like planting plant after plant after plant and like never seeming to find an end. But in the end, it was just really cool to think that like 20 years down the road, that stream could actually keep water in the summer instead of like drying out because there's no cover and all the sediment falls into the bank. So that's kind of like the proudest professional thing. And then just personally, I think I've grown a lot here, like being more comfortable living with the same 7 people day in and day out and like learning that team dynamic and like having hard conversations and learning how to communicate problems and get through the like frustrating times. It's been definitely a challenge, but also really cool to experience.
I was going to ask about that. Is now every time I'm just going to say your job changes, does the team you work with change? Have you been with the same group all along, or does it change every year?
The team always stays the same, with one exception, and I experienced that exception because it's not really, like, typically if you just went through this program, like, straightforwardly, just like you started, you ended, you didn't really apply for anything different, you would have the exact same team the entire year for every project. And so you just like always live with the same people. But then for me, I had this really cool experience because for my second round, which is also the longest, I applied for kind of like a specialty team that they offer. They offer it like a couple times a year where you can send in an application and okay, it's kind of like takes some background explaining, but basically like us as corps members, we have no say where we go. We never know the project until like a week before we go. So it's kind of freeing because you never have to worry about anything until like a week before you go, and then you're just like, what do I pack? But there's these teams called composite teams where everybody in the Corps reads the application, so you know exactly where it is, what the work will entail, who you'll be working with, where you'll be living, and then like everybody can apply for it, and they have to tell you, like the staff members, why they're passionate about that, why they want to do this project, and they have to make a good argument kind of like for themselves to be able to go onto the specialty team. And I am really glad that I did apply for one of those, and that's how I ended up working on Catalina Island and also in San Luis Obispo with Meredith, who I just described. So that was kind of a thing where then I joined a whole new team of a whole bunch of random people who were all like hand-selected to be on this team, and I think that was just like one of my greatest experiences from all of NCCC. So that was really cool.
Now, you talked about you're around these people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I like the people I work with,
Mm-hmm.
but if I were around them all the time, it would drive me up a tree.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens in a work dynamic is there are some, not everybody works at the same pace,
Mm-hmm.
with the same intensity. There's some people who their personal problems will make it harder for them to keep up, or their personal problems come into work. You have the other people who, as we talked about, the cynicism might sort of come in.
Definitely.
And you've talked about hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something where you have a leader who walks you through that, or is it you guys got to figure it out? You're going to be putting up with these people for another 4 months.
Yeah, we do have a team leader, but I have an amazing team leader. She's spectacular and just a really a strong leader in the way that she knows when she has to say something or when she has to kind of be that facilitator, but she really is more hands-off and kind of knows that if something is important enough, it will come up, and we'll take we'll take that experience to heart and be able to confront people and have a good conversation and work through it. We kind of have the privilege of I don't know if I'd call it a privilege or not. Maybe it's kind of like a terrifying thing that shouldn't exist in the world, but we can't really escape, you're here and we have one van that is grounded unless we get approval to take it anywhere. So you can't run away.
Yeah.
It's kind of you're forced to confront people, and you can have an argument, but then you're going to have to sleep next to them, the same night and eat with them the next day and work with them the next day. So it's on us to kind of have those conversations and just figure out our differences, and it's challenging. Sometimes things just go, we just let it go, and then you have this weird dynamic of nobody's saying anything, so we'll just let it go. I don't know. It's very, very, very strange, but also, it's a learning experience for sure.
Now, my impression of you is that you're fairly introverted.
Mm-hmm.
You don't share a lot. Now, for me, my introversion is I can be around people. Introversion doesn't mean that you're the one hiding in the corner with the drink going, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
It means that interacting with people and being around people actually takes energy,
mm-hmm.
whereas being by yourself gives you energy.
Yeah.
And you always struck me as someone who was also introverted.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to deal with the fact that you're with other people all the time?
Honestly, I don't know, because you have me totally described 100% accurately, and I've never all through college, my Friday and Saturday nights I spent at home with a book or a movie or with my significant other, just hanging out. I don't like being around people. I don't like party situations usually, because it takes so much energy to go and be, have to talk to everybody and be friendly and keep a conversation. And I enjoy being by myself. I always have. But yeah, that's kind of one reason why I wanted to join Americorps, to learn kind of how to be more of a team player and how to be more comfortable, being around people constantly. And I've kind of been able to break out of that shell a little bit, where I'm comfortable in the team setting, and I can being around people I wouldn't necessarily say has started to give me energy by any means. Definitely very energy absorbing. But I am starting to like it a little more, just being surrounded by people who you know really well and you care about and you can still be yourself around. I guess it's kind of just been, that's definitely one way that I've changed and hopefully grown throughout this program.
Well, we've talked about some of the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not every assignment is, as I said, it's not all glory.
Right.
Has there been a job or an assignment where even afterward you go, I should have tapped out. That wasn't any good?
Yeah. My last project, I was in Sheridan, Wyoming, which is beautiful. Like, I love Wyoming. I have a real soft spot in my heart for, like, the wide open spaces, you know, like, it's so idealistic, but I just have this, like, I always have, like, I just feel really drawn to the west and those, like, long roads that just lead to the horizon. So being in Wyoming was amazing. But we were working with Habitat for Humanity, which is also, like, theoretically amazing. They do great work. They build homes. They're a great organization that just has so much going on. But construction is really not my strong suit. I I have always kind of not really enjoyed power tools. I don't really like heights, like being on roofs, and I'm really bad at like I don't even know what it is, like geometric configuration. So like if somebody says like, here, go build this wall based on this schematic, like it takes my brain so long to figure out like how those pieces are supposed to fit together and like what you're supposed to do. So it was pretty much like I woke up every day terrified of what I would have to do for the rest of the day. And every week I just like waited till the weekend where I didn't have to be on the construction site and I didn't have to worry about like people falling off the roof or like throwing hammers down, you know, like it was just terrifying. Every day was like something that I just like had to try to get out of, you know. So I'd say that, yeah, that still stands out as like I'm really glad that I survived that experience and that I had it because it challenged me to like go outside of my comfort zone every day. And I loved Wyoming, but I would never ever want to do it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the next question would be,
Mm-hmm.
how long do you see yourself doing this? And where do you, the interview question everybody asks, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But also, what are you going to take out of this? Because what you described sounds wonderful
Mm-hmm.
and great, and no one will pay you for it.
I know, right? Yeah, okay. So a lot of questions there. Well, to answer the first part of the question, we actually do not have much time left. This is a 10-month program usually, but with the shutdown, it's been 9. And my last day is July 24th, so I'm in my last month of the whole experience, which is crazy. It's gone by so fast. And then afterward, yeah, I've really been trying to figure that out. I think I've learned a lot here about kind of how I want to spend my life, like what kind of work I want to do. And immediately outside of the program, I'm going to be, hopefully, this is kind of like a big structure that's in my brain and kind of on paper and out there in the universe. But I'm going to be expanding an organization called One Cool Earth. It's an organization that I worked with just for one day back in San Luis Obispo during my second round. And it's this amazing little nonprofit that was founded in the 90s. And it kind of, the name implies like One Cool Earth, like it was started during the time that climate change like really hit the news. So it's like One Cool Earth, like it's a cool place, but also we need to cool it down.
Okay.
And yeah, they started off just planting trees. Like they went around the area and just were like establishing like native plant nurseries, selling trees, having people like plant native species in their yards. All this in hopes that kind of having more like carbon-sucking things would, help cool the planet and get some of the CO2 out of the atmosphere. Since then, over the past decade, they've really expanded, and now they have like community gardens at local schools. They have student-run plant nurseries where they have like students handling a greenhouse and like propagating different native plants, and then selling them to the community or just like putting them in the school grounds. And I love them. Like they just have this really solid mission where their mission is fluid. Like it's a solid, fluid thing. I know that totally doesn't make sense, but it works for them. Like it's always changing. They can adapt to any situation and pretty much do whatever they want, but they always have this like foundational mission statement that is to like empower communities to help the planet. And I love, like, it's so idealistic and I love it. I cling to it. So they only exist right now in one city, and that's San Luis Obispo, California. But I've been talking to the board of directors there, and I'm really excited to be opening kind of like my own branch of that organization in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm moving home to. So that's my first step. It's totally, not like a bill-paying thing by any means. It's like a passion project. So I'll probably just be finding some kind of like part-time job that fits my lifestyle, hopefully like a food co-op because I love food. And just trying to get that off the ground and hopefully not hitting too many obstacles that kind of make me reevaluate my life choices. But
as you've gone on this adventure, you've been traveling for, about 2 years, I think?
Yeah, it was kind of like throughout college there was some travel, but then also the program has just been about a year.
Okay. And one thing that kind of stopped me from going into the Peace Corps is I was in a relationship that ended up in a marriage that ended up in divorce.
Okay.
And, we were in the opening, the Act One, if you were. If everything is a story, this was Act One, and we hadn't hit Act Two yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, if I go all these places, there's no way we could keep contact.
Oh, yeah.
But now we've got Skype, and we've got, you can have better than a Star Trek phone with your iPhone.
Yeah.
All these communication things, but it sounds like you're out, because I asked if you had Skype, and you said, yeah, well, there's no Wi-Fi out in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you able to stay connected to friends, family, and your significant other while you're out with hippies in the deepest woods of America?
Well, yeah, good question. I think my family would probably say, well, she doesn't. I'm terrible at that. I call my mom maybe like once a month, and my dad hopefully, like I would try once a month, but sometimes I'm like, gosh, I haven't talked to you since, when was that? Oh, that was Wyoming. Like I judge it by distance rather than time. But, it's okay. Like I'm really into letter writing, so I've written some letters and tried to kind of connect with people that way, so it's a little bit more of
wait. People still write letters?
Yeah,
by hand with pen and paper and everything?
Yeah, stamps. Like, they're expensive these days, but we do it.
I have trouble getting people to send emails.
I know.
Email? No, I just text.
Yeah, I love letter writing. I think that being here is really important to me because, like, I'm always experiencing different things, and I want to be able to share that, especially with my partner, Kelly. Like, I don't get to call as much as I'd want, especially since, like, service here is kind of on and off, and also there's a lot going on. Like, we have team meetings every night, and we have dinners. Like, we all take turns cooking, and we have like physical training exercises that we have to do 3 times a week, and like it all takes up so much time. So I never really have time to just sit down and like have a good conversation. But yeah, it works out. Like, we try to, make time to call my sister and my mom at least once a month and kind of catch them up on what I'm doing. Facebook really helps. And then, as for my partner, like, we have a good, like, a long hour to 2 hour conversation at least once a week. And I think that's kind of really good and healthy, and we've been able to maintain it without kind of, like, taking away from either of us living, like, in the present and in our current world. So it works out.
Okay. One other thing that you've done sporadically during the time I've known you is that you've blogged and written about these things that you're interested in, about helping other people, about the environment, and you're starting to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about blogging is that, much like letter writing, it almost feels like blogging is becoming a thing of the past where, oh, no, I just tweet. It's short, it's quick, it's this.
Right.
I've kind of jumped into podcasting first because Joe and I, we love comics, we love talking comics, and we wanted to get that idea of 2 guys in odd circumstances talking about their hobby. So as you go into blogging, what is your mindset? When you sit down to write a blog, what do you want to accomplish? Why are you writing a blog?
I think my mindset is a mix of, yes, this is like an old-fashioned thing, like who blogs anymore, so I kind of just think, like, nobody's reading this and kind of just, like, writing to myself. But it also is kind of like maybe that is why I'm doing it. Like, I have like, great conversations with people in everyday life, but then if that never really goes beyond, like, the yurt that we're talking in, or the room, or the house, or whatever, then, I don't know, like, it feels like there's a big lack of, like, potential for conversation and thought, you know, if you're not kind of, like, trying to spread that idea, even if it is kind of, like, a way that maybe isn't reaching a lot of people. But for me, like, I still feel like it's putting the ideas out there into this, like, crazy glob of a universe that, like, somewhere, somehow, maybe somebody will read one sentence and be like, oh man, I've thought about that before, and this person gets it. And I don't know, I guess that's just kind of it for me. Like, I think I've always been interested in the idea of blogging just because it's a way to, like, organize and collect thoughts that seem really, like, not connected, I guess, in real life, and then trying to bring them together and actually put it down in, like, a solid format, and then hopefully, like, collaborate with others through, you know, through sharing it on Facebook with friends and family, or maybe just having, like, somebody stumble upon it someday and be like, huh, interesting topic. I guess I have never thought of it that way before. So, I don't know. It's kind of silly, I guess.
Well, I think one of the reasons I started my solo podcast is, and I talk about it way too much, is everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even remember who the writer was who said it, but every time a person dies, a library burns down.
Wow.
So there are all these wonderful stories that are floating out there. And I'm kind of, like you, I'm kind of in uncharted territory because most of the stuff I do is comic-based, but there's so much more. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you're still idealistic, and you're younger than me, not by much, but younger than me.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of dinosaurs.
That's true. Yeah, in terms of human civilization.
Yes, there's so much. One of the things when I don't even talk about climate change and pollution and things like that anymore, because, again, the cynicism, you hear about the ever-growing island of plastic.
Yeah.
You hear about the scientists now saying, well, we're past the tipping point. We're done.
Right.
We're done. It's over. There's nothing we can do.
Right.
If we did everything now, it still wouldn't be enough, and we're not doing anything.
Right.
But you've been out kind of on the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the stewardship of the environment on the front lines? How does it feel to you where you're not sitting and watching people argue on cable TV?
Right. Okay, I love this question, and it ties, like, perfectly into why I'm trying to start the new blog that I'm writing. Because, so, the new blog is about democracy, and it's still forming. Like, I can't quite articulate my thoughts on it in the way that I want to. But what I'm trying to, like, argue, and what I see from the work that I've done, and from a lot of, like, books that I've read, just in college, and then recently, like, different articles that I've picked up here and there, is that, like, there's these huge global issues, and we have CNN, we have media, and all media is owned by, like, 4 companies that are all fed by the same, like, fuel stream of money. And I think that it's almost like, okay, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, because that's not where I'm going with it.
Oh, don't worry about it. I have a brother-in-law who, no matter what conspiracy theory you think of, he's way, way, way further out there.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of is, in a way, this, like, big operation where you have so few people controlling what the masses hear and see and know. And I think that it's really disempowering. Like, you see, yeah, the big island of plastic. You see the polar bears are drowning. You see, like, you know, there's flooding everywhere, and then there's drought, and there's, like, the world seems like it's ending, right? Like, it's just, there's no end to the negative things that you hear. Like, the rainforest is being destroyed by these big companies, and we have no say in it. Monsanto owns, like, you know, whatever it is, 50% of the world's grain trade, and now most of that is genetically modified. Like, just, there's no end to the negative and to the horrible, like, really big picture, horrible, horrible things. So, to me, like, have reached that point several times where I'm just like, this is pointless. Like, we're all going to die. The world is coming to an end. Like, what's even the point? We've destroyed ourselves. We destroyed the earth. But now, like, the reason that I'm starting this blog on democracy is because I think that we can look at the big picture and say it's terrible, and that will never lead us anywhere. Like, that it's so disempowering. You have no ability to control anything or fix anything if you look at it that way. But what I've seen is that people can make a change, and it all starts at the local level. Like, if you can change one community, if you can change one household, you've made a difference. And then because communities start doing it, you have, like, regional changes that get made, and that's all it takes. Like, that's what needs to happen. And I think that people can't see it that way because we're so caught up on this, like, big picture, like, you know, our democratic or like our political system is broken and you can't elect the right president because they're all funded by the same corporations, and people get into that mindset. But really, like, we don't need those nationwide changes. We need local changes to keep out the big corporations and to do things like right here and now. And I've seen that happening, and I think that it's extremely powerful, and that's kind of what I want to like spend my life like promoting and changing. And hopefully, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. To be honest, when I do get that, well, you know, what's it matter? At least the world will last. You know, we won't destroy the world. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the next species that takes over will be better than us.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a line in MASH that I just kind of keep close to my heart, where someone yells at the Alan Alda character, Hawkeye, what are you going to do, save the world? And he says, no. I'm just going to keep my little corner of it clean.
Wow.
And while I worked at the group home, you know, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with both ends of the extreme. You're dealing with very abused people, but you're also dealing with abusers.
Yeah.
And you'd read the files and you'd think, yeah, well, this is horrific. All I could think is, you know what? I'm going to make this a safe place for the people here.
Wow.
I'm going to foster positive interaction and maybe impart a skill or two. Maybe teach them how to make a meal, or teach them how to have an argument where it doesn't turn into a fight.
Wow.
And you just have to keep going back to that small, the simple, because it does, especially with our media the way it is, and the constant connection, you do get wrapped into kind of the metaculture.
Yeah.
And the metaculture is very negative. So I actually really applaud you for being able to pull that back from time to time and latch on to, you know what, I can keep this stream flowing.
Yeah.
I can make this family a house. I can give this community the ability to grow their own food.
Right.
And I think one of the things about making our lives so much easier through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and currently is we keep getting further and further away from taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, right?
Not knowing how to plant a garden, how to take care of a garden. Not knowing that herbs don't just come in the little tin all dried up.
Yeah.
I often talk about how there are so many foods I didn't eat because where I grew up, they weren't in the grocery store. I didn't have any squash until I moved to Minnesota.
Wow.
Didn't know what they were. All I knew was the joke that George Carlin said, I don't want squash. It sounds like someone sat on dinner.
Funny.
So I really applaud you for that. And the fact that you're going to be taking it into kind of blogging and trying to find a career around it, kind of build a career, that's really brave.
Thank you.
Do you think about the fact that you're kind of going out on a limb that's bending? Or do you just, you know what, this is what I have to do?
I think it's what I have to do. Like, I can't, I guess it's almost, okay, this is kind of what it's like. The the way that the mainstream media is, the way that we've just talked about, like, all of these big picture issues, it's like, how can I, as a young person who knows all of the problems in the world, like, how can I, if I want to live a life that is, like, meaningful at all to me, and I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that I've, like, lived in a good way, like, how can I not just, like, go off and do something that is, like, trying to make a difference? And, like, you know, just ignoring the problems is way easier, and you can probably be very, very happy that way. But unfortunately, my brain, like, thinks about them too much, and I can't just ignore things. So I think it feels like it's kind of scary, like, not really knowing what kind of career I'm going to have, or, like, how I'm going to, like, make a living. And I do want to travel, so, like, how do you pay for that and all this? But yeah, I don't know. I just think that, like, there's so much power that people can reclaim, and there's so much that we can do, you know, just, like, by, having a garden in your front yard. Like, you can save so much money a year. You can save so much on the environment by not having the pesticides and the shipping costs and the gasoline used in the big trucks that ship your tomatoes from California to Minnesota in January. You know, like, those are all things that, like, those little acts can really, really change the world. And I know that that's what I need to do is just go and, like, tell people that, basically.
Well, and I'm going to add one thing to it. It's selfish not to buy the tomato that's been shipped from California, because the tomato that's been shipped from California tastes like crap.
Right.
Because it's picked green.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have any taste.
Exactly.
When I visited my parents, they've got very acidic soil.
Mm-hmm.
Because they raised horses for years, and now they've taken that and turned it, and you bite into that tomato and there's that wonderful acidy bite to it.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my gosh, I forgot. You don't want to eat one of these if you have a cut on the inside of your lip.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I grew last year my first heirloom tomatoes. They were a brandy wine that I got from Seed Savers, and I was amazed. Like, it is nothing, a real tomato is nothing like what you find in the grocery store. And yeah, like Michael Pollan, all of these authors have, like, written this and been, like, yelling this from the rooftops for the past, like, probably decade now. But people just, it's so hard to make that click to be like, wait a second, it's January in Wisconsin. Should I really be buying this tomato? Or should I really be buying this, like, mango that was shipped all the way from Mexico? You know, like, it's just crazy, the pathways that we've created to make something so insane seem so normal. And it just blows my mind.
Well, one of the reasons that Joe and I started our podcast, as I said, Joe was a traveling TSA agent. Mm-hmm. And as such, it's okay. He was actually in Barrow, Alaska for like 3 months. Uh-huh. And Barrow, Alaska is the northernmost city in North America.
Wow.
It's the 30 Days of Night city.
Oh my gosh.
And so one of the things he had to think about was, what does he pack? Because he's a nerd like me. And you got to have your comics and your books and your this and your that. Mm-hmm. Now, you probably, because you've been doing this a while, and as one of those hippie liberal freaks, you don't have a lot of possessions. Uh-huh. What do you bring for the times when you're not working or talking with people? Like, do you bring electronic books? Do you bring real books? Do you get books when you're there? How do you entertain yourself?
That's an excellent question. I came to Americorps, so we have to pack everything that we want to bring for this 10 months. We have to pack it into an Army-size green duffel bag. And you can have one travel-on backpack, too, or carry-on backpack, I mean. So I came here almost probably at least a quarter of that green duffel bag that I had, which is not that big. Like, you can wear it as a backpack. At least a quarter of it was filled with books, which was a terrible idea. Then you get here, and they give you, we have to wear uniforms every day, so they give you, like, 3 pairs of cargo pants, 2 shorts, like, 6 shirts, and then, like, a parka and rain gear and all this stuff. And then you go on Spike, which is, like, our project rounds, and you have to pack everything that you want to bring for that month-long project into this red bag that they give you. And so then I'm sitting here with this predicament, like, okay, so I have a ton of books, and then all of this uniform gear. So basically that's all I can bring, which was great. And I did it for the first 2 rounds. I just packed books and the uniform that I wore. I'd wear my uniform to bed basically, and the only other thing I had was a pair of running shorts for our physical training sessions. But then I realized that carrying around 50 pounds of books is not an efficient way to travel when you're trying to be efficient and, smart. So I ended up sending all of my books home with my partner Kelly when she came to visit me in Wyoming. And now I've kind of just been trying to use library resources. We pass around books a lot nowadays, now that a lot of people have kind of realized that they can't travel with so many books. Somebody will read something and then we'll pass it along to the next person, and that's a good way. But yeah, that's kind of it. I recently got my computer from home, so I've been kind of having some online time whenever we're in town. But that's about it. Letter writing, books, and computer time when it's available.
So what's the best book you've read in the past 2 years?
Ooh, that's a really hard question. Well, I always am really bad at answering that because it's always the current book that I'm reading is the best book I've ever read. But actually the one I am reading now is great. I got it at Powell's in Portland, for those of you who are big bookstore fans. But it's by Frances Moore Lappe, and it's called Getting a Grip, and it's kind of fueling this new, it's not new, it's actually a really old interest, in the state of democracy and kind of, what that means in contemporary American culture. But it's all about, kind of what we've been talking about, getting a grip. The world is crazy. There's so much going wrong. How can one person make any kind of difference without going absolutely crazy? You can't not go insane if you're trying to solve all of the world's problems, because you're not going to be able to do it, and then you're going to burn out. But the author just has this really inspirational way of looking at things, and so I'm learning a lot from that, and I would recommend it to anybody who's kind of interested in this whole making a difference thing.
And the last thing I'm going to ask,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be kind of a deeper question.
Okay.
If you could sit down with someone who had the exact political opposite beliefs as you,
Oh my gosh.
and they would say, all right, tell me why I should care about one thing, what would it be, and how would you convince them?
Oh my gosh, this is a hard question. Okay, so I'm coming up with what they have to care about and then how I would convince them to care about it.
Yeah. Because one of the things I don't like about our current political discussion is that we're always yelling at each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're always shouting at each other. And even when you ask someone an information-seeking question,
Yeah.
they will get mad at you for asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do a lot of politics on the podcast, but the recent Hobby Lobby decision, I put out into the Twitter, on my fire breathing Twitter and on my Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
please explain to me why contraception is so important. Why is this issue so dear to your heart that you don't want certain people to get certain kinds of contraception,
Mm-hmm.
and yet other kinds are okay?
Yeah.
And explain to me why this is so passionate for you.
Hmm.
And it was kind of heartbreaking that nobody could have a discussion.
Wow.
It turned into shouting,
Ugh.
Online shouting.
Yeah.
And I understand that people get very passionate, but I think our communication with people we don't agree with has really broken down.
Yeah.
So you're sitting in the yurt, the head of Monsanto, or let's just say a salesperson from Monsanto is sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
and you get 5 minutes to pick one issue. Or it doesn't have to be that. It could be someone who thinks that gay people are an abomination, or thinks that why should we care about the environment because we were put here to use things. One issue that you feel really strongly for, and kind of how would you kind of open your heart?
Okay.
There you go. Longest question in the history of podcasts. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, man. All right. Well, my first thought on this is that kind of a newer thing that I'm learning and that I definitely do not have down. It's not a skill that I yet have quite cultured, but seek to. And that is like active listening. And I think that if I was ever in that situation, I'm lucky here to be surrounded by people that are so much of the same thought process as me that it's really easy. Like I just don't have to encounter that as much as I used to, or that I do in the real world. Like I go into a city and I overhear things and I'm like, whoa, people still think that way. I've spent 10 months in a bubble. Like it's really shocking. But, I think I would start off by saying, like, explain to me your perspective on this. Like, tell me what you think and how, like, what does this mean in your heart? How do you see it? Like, just figuring out where they're coming from on it. Because I really believe, and again, this, I know it's, like, idealistic and it's so naive, but, like, I really think that everybody at the root of, like, their beliefs and their, like, core central tenets are, like, the same thing. Like, we all want the same thing. And it's becoming so obvious that it's almost ridiculous. Like, in our, like, contemporary political culture, you have, like, right-wing, left-wing, and you have these, like, two sides that are basically wanting the exact same thing, but because they're bickering, they're not seeing that, like, other people are going straight down the middle and, like, ruining both of their interests. So Monsanto is, like, a good example, because you have, like, these really extreme, like, left-wing liberal people who despise Monsanto and are saying, like, you're ruining the world, you're taking control of these crops, like, you're making farmers commit suicide in, like, all of these different countries, including the U.S., like, you're taking away livelihoods and, like, you're killing us with these genetic modifications, blah, 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 like, you have so much. And then you have right-wing people who are also saying that, like, this is the part that I don't quite understand. Like, you don't want the government to be interfering with, your life, and you want to be kind of separate from, like, government manipulation, and you also don't want, like, taxation and whatever. But then somehow these corporations are implementing all of our political decisions by having their board of directors in our political structure, as Obama's right-hand people or whatever. So, like, we're fighting the same exact battles. Like, we want the same things, but the companies and the politics are, like, skewing us to make us think that we're fighting each other. And so I think it would all start with listening and just being like, I know we can find common ground here, but I need to hear kind of, like, your side of it 100% first before I can, like, try to have a conversation. I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's a really good question, and I wish I had a good answer.
Kassie, I want to thank you for taking some time and walking outside in the mosquitoes and the weather, and hopefully it hasn't been raining.
No, thank goodness.
And hopefully you've got a wonderful view.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time, and I also want to thank you for your friendship because, gosh, we've known each other for, 5 years now?
At least, yeah, maybe.
And it's been fascinating to me. A lot of the people I worked with in the movie theater were teenagers, and it's been fascinating to me kind of watching people move through a period of life that I remember very much as being pure chaos. And just seeing other people moving through it in a way that, I don't know, I don't want to say that I'm inspired by it, because that gives way too much credit, but I am kind of inspired by it. To see people who are living out what they wanted to be. And it's been very cool to see. So I want to thank you for your time. And if people want to visit your blog, how can they get there?
Well, I think if they type in Rethink Democracy at Blogspot, they should be able, or at blogger.com, that should be able to find it.
And do you have a fire-breathing Twitter machine yet?
Working on it. It'll come along someday.
Well, when you get the fire-breathing Twitter machine, we'll promote that on the podcast too.
Excellent.
And thanks again.
Well, thanks, Corey. Great talking with you.
Well, there you go. For those of you who are saying that you really missed the comic books, don't worry. The next part of the Jack Kirby podcast is dropping later this week. But there will be more episodes like this where I will be interviewing people or talking to people or getting their stories just because I find the story interesting, and I hope that you enjoy it. I'm looking for your feedback. You can always contact me at corey.strode@gmail.com. There's also the other ways to contact me that's in the ads that I will be running now. Crazy Comics and Stories is brought to you by DreamHost.com. DreamHost.com is the best, bar none, web host in the whole known universe. And you can save $20 on your first year of web hosting. Just use the code CRAYZ, K-R-A-Y-Z, and you get $20 off your first year of hosting. Graze.com is healthy snacks delivered right to your door. And if you use the code Corey S3R5P, that's C-O-R-Y, S3R5P, you get your first and fifth box free. Go to Graze.com to find out more. If you want to contact us at Crazy Comics and Stories, you can. You can either go to our Facebook fan page at Crazy Comics and Stuff. You can email us at corey.strode@gmail.com, or you can call us at 952-856-0519. When you do that, we will read or play your comment on the air. If you want to advertise on Crazy Comics and Stories, you can. Just go ahead and email me at corey.strode@gmail.com. Subject, advertising. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. This is Brian Chrisman.
Shane Kelly.
Adam Murdo.
Matt.
Chris Eberly.
Peter Rios.
And we're from the Comic Geek Speak podcast.
On May 2nd of this year, our friend and fellow podcaster, Jamie D'Alessandro, lost his battle with cancer.
In honor of Jamie, we are participating in a 5K and 10K race to raise money for the Livestrong Foundation, which provides support for people with cancer.
We will be taking part in the Team Livestrong Challenge, Philly, on Sunday, August 17th in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania.
We are collectively running
and walking
under the team name of Jamie's Avengers.
If you'd like to join us in the event or make a donation to our team, go to livestrong.org and search for Jamie's Avengers.
Thank you all for your time, and
Jamie's Avengers Assemble!
And there you go. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for your time, and we'll talk again soon.